Alrighty, welcome. We have our second interview. This is 6 p.m. Monday with Patrick Ambrosi. Patrick, we hope you and your family are safe, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having this process.
Awesome. And so what we're going to do is we'll go through our questions. The first question is a multi-parter, so I will do all the parts, and then Councilman Lavarro and I will go back and forth. So we'll start with the basic questions. So why are you interested in the Ward D council seat?
Sure. First, though, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Patrick Ambrosi. I am the founder and president of the Atlantic Gordon Park Conservancy. And I'm interested in the position because I have been committed to serving the Heights community for over a decade and have served on multiple boards. Previously served on the Jersey City Reservoir Alliance Board as their treasurer, and I am a member of the Jersey City Parks Coalition. I've worked on several political campaigns throughout my life, including the late Councilman Michael Youn's first council race. I have worked with several park organizations and neighborhood groups throughout the years, addressing issues such as open space, litter, and other constituent services for residents in the Heights.
Thank you, Patrick. So the second question is, let me get the exact phrasing. So please describe what education, training, or experience you have that is relevant and makes you qualified to serve as a council representative. And then specifically, do you have any training in public administration, urban planning, or municipal finance?
Sure. So I actually have a bachelor's in industrial organizational psychology and economics, as well as a master's in public administration. And I currently work as a fiscal analyst for the Hudson County Housing and Community Development, where I administer funds for CDBG and home programs.
All right, thank you. And then the last part of this introduction question was, at this point, do you plan on running in the special election in November?
At this point, yes, I do plan on running in November.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I've got the second question. And if you follow Councilman Young in council, you knew he was known for his very probing analytical questions and his willingness to take on his own council colleagues and the politically powerful. How specifically will you follow that example, and how would you approach the role differently than Councilman Young?
So as you two know, and many people know, I had the privilege and honor of working with Councilman Michael Youn in his first council race. And thereafter in setting up his office on Central Avenue, which is something that people really like and love about him, is that he was always available for his constituents. Now, what I'll say is when Michael Youn first became a councilman, one thing that he had a pet peeve about is he could tell that the council members were not reading the agenda. And he was always a stickler for reading the agenda, reading it word for word, highlighting everything. And so I think it's just, in a sense, being detail oriented. In terms of his approach, I think he always led with the thought that he was doing right by the Heights community and by the community in large, Jersey City. I'm not sure I would change the approach. I think that it was very sound. And I think that it left a legacy here in Jersey City. And so what I can say to the people of the Heights is that they will receive the same kind of leadership from me.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Starting off with a more broad question, but so in your mind, what are the most difficult challenges facing the Heights?
I think pre-COVID-19, we were looking at affordable housing and development. We were looking at parking and transportation, and then litter. Now you're moving on post-COVID-19, and we're looking at small business relief. We're looking at tenant protections and homeowner relief, and creating a roadmap to opening Jersey City up.
All right, thanks.
Patrick, you identified the challenges there, pre-COVID and post-COVID. What do you say will be your top 3 legislative priorities if you should be appointed to the position?
So I believe it's on the city budget, affordable housing, and COVID-19 relief specifically, working with small businesses and the city council to make sure that small businesses receive the most that they can from the city council, from the state, and from the federal government.
If Patrick, if I can follow up on both those questions, the difficult challenges and legislative priorities. So, you mentioned pre-COVID and post-COVID. So pre-COVID, you talked about, affordable housing and development. Makes a lot of sense. Can you elaborate on that answer? What specifically were you seeing that represented a challenge? And then can you connect that into, how would you try to potentially address it?
So in terms of affordable housing, we don't see much affordable housing here in the Heights. And when you look at it, it's predominantly because nonprofit groups like Garden State Episcopal aren't able to buy homes within the Heights to convert into affordable units. That's mainly because the pricing is high. So I think that, doing things like the inclusionary zoning and other subjects that we're going to get into with other questions that you guys have set, we'll be able to address issues like the affordable housing in the Heights.
Okay, and then for those three legislative priorities, I think you mentioned the budget, which we do have a more detailed question on coming later,
Yeah.
and then COVID relief, which we also had another one. But is there anything like, I guess, would you care to elaborate at all on any of those priorities in your mind of how you would try to take them on?
So again, with the city budget, I think it's knowing that we're going to have to make a tough decision, right? Cuts are going to have to be made, and as a hopeful council person, it would look at trying to make the cuts in the correct spots. So for me, it would be looking at trying to keep capital improvements and park maintenance and park restorations going, while also looking at making sure that city employees are still receiving a paycheck and still working.
All right, thank you. So the next question I think is mine. So what action would you take as a council person to address parking issues in the Heights and in Jersey City?
So the way I look at parking issues, it's very closely related to transportation. So first, it's advocating for better transportation services and possibly even looking at creating a city-run bus line. I would also say enforce developers when they're building their 10, 20 condo units or rentals, that they look to put enough parking spaces for the residents that will be moving in. And then looking at increasing the municipal parking lot capacity and using other facilities such as school parking lots for overnight parking for residents.
I have a quick follow-up, or two quick follow-ups on that. The first one is you mentioned the city-run bus line. Right before, unfortunately, COVID really hit us, the city VIA system got started, which is, a form of a city bus line. It's a private company, a private contract, but providing subsidized services, subsidized transportation. And did you have any sort of thoughts on that approach to tackling issues of parking and transportation?
So I think the idea of VIA is novel. I, however, think that it's not scalable. It's a service that fits maybe 6 to 7 people. And when we have seen it in places like New York City, it's as in addition to other services. So New York City has the train, the subways, different modes of transportation, and VIA just supplements it. In Jersey City, we don't have really much transportation to supplement. So I think VIA is good, but it doesn't address the needs of residents overall.
Great. And then the second quick follow-up was, I think certainly in 2017, I know this was broached, and I think subsequently, the idea of building a parking garage either on Central Avenue or near Central Avenue. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that idea.
So I actually like the idea of looking into building municipal parking lots. However, with COVID-19, a lot of good ideas or a lot of things that the city council were looking to do, it just won't be possible. That's why I think we look at what we have available for us to use. So that's including using schools for residents to park overnight, which is something that the city is kind of doing now because of COVID-19, and hopefully we can work on making that more of a permanent fixture.
Great. No, we can't hear you.
The next question has to do with inclusionary zoning and rent control. Can you tell us what your position is on inclusionary zoning? And do you think there should be any changes made to our rent control legislation?
So I support inclusionary zoning, but I think our focus needs to move from the 80% to 100% AMI and look closer to 30 to 50% AMI, which really includes low income. In terms of, and I also believe that inclusionary zoning should be added into buildings that are 10 units or more. In terms of rent control legislation, I believe we need to add a right to counsel for tenants that are considered low income. We also need to maintain that language affirming if the dwelling is rent controlled or not, be included into the lease. I think those two are very important pieces that need to be added into rent control.
Can I do a follow-up on that?
Yeah, please.
Can you just clarify, you said the AMI was moving it to from 80 to 100 to 30 to 60, is that what you said?
So I said that we should look at focusing the AMI to 30 to 50%.
As opposed to
We'll
what?
have a mix, but I think that the city overall needs to focus on lower income residents, so 30 to 50%.
I got it.
And-
And then, can I just ask, James, on the rent control, do you have any thoughts about, right now rent control applies to 5 units or more. Any thoughts about 4 units or less?
Was that question to me or to the councilman?
To you, Patrick.
Patrick.
Could you repeat the question?
So rent control currently applies, the current laws on the books for Jersey City applies to buildings, properties with 5 units or more. Would you extend, what do you think of extending it to 4 units or less? Rent control. So that's like 1 family homes, 2 family homes, and then build small build 3 or 4 units.
So I think it would be a good idea to move it to 4 units and up. I'm not sure that I would move to doing it for 1 to 3 units.
Okay, thank you.
And then I just wanted to clarify, not for you, Patrick, but for anyone who's watching, when Patrick talked about AMI, it stands for area median income. And so it's basically how much income does a person or a family make to qualify for affordable housing? So 30 to 50% of area median income, which, it gets into kind of the wonky world of acronyms that we live in. So the next question for you, Patrick, is about schools. So it's a 2-parter. What is your position on the upcoming school board referendum about governance, mayoral control versus the elected board? And then in your position, how would you, or in their position, excuse me, how would you address this current school budget crisis? We have, lots of formulas that show our schools are underfunded. At the same point, we're obviously in the middle of an economic calamity, and we don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah, so when the school board referendum was announced, I was against it. I believe that people should have a right to choose who represents people on the school board. And today, I still believe that. And in November, I will be voting against the referendum. In their shoes, I would really look at establishing a hiring freeze and looking at the salaries of those in the school district administration. Just like the city now, because of COVID-19, they're going to have to make hard decisions. And I think that these cuts have to come from furlough programs and looking at it from a top-bottom approach. So the teachers would be last in line for anything in terms of furlough or layoffs.
Okay. The next 2 questions have to do with the response to COVID-19 and the pandemic here. My question is, what can the city do to help residents and small businesses survive and recover from the economic fallout from the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, so I first want to applaud the City Council for moving on tenant rent freeze. I believe that's up for a vote in the next council meeting. I could be wrong, but we should look to actually expand that measure to include commercial renters as well. A lot of our small business owners have been affected. Downtown, for example, Newark Avenue, they have to pay rent. And so I think that it's important that we extend that kind of relief to them as well. And as a council, look, we should look to advocate for deferred utility payments for both residential and commercial properties. We should look to build partnerships with nonprofits that can provide services within the healthcare field, financial assistance, mental health, and legal services. Now that in a time where people may be strapped for cash and trying to save a lot more. So those are, I think, three things that I believe that the City Council can effectively do.
Great.
Alrighty, so the next question is a budget question on COVID-19. The mayor's announced that he anticipates we may have up to a $70 million budget shortfall from declining revenue and increased expenses during this time. How would you prioritize the city's budget during COVID-19? What would be things you believe should never be touched? And then what are areas where you would look to potentially cut?
So, look, I would look to prioritize spending on health and human services. I think they're doing a good job with everything that they've done so far. And we need to allow them to continue providing services to the community and building nonprofit partnerships with Healthier JC. Another priority would be our commitment to maintaining our streets and open space clean and capital improvement projects. In terms of cuts, I think that we should continue the hiring freeze. And we should look at furlough versus layoffs, right? And in order to be fair, I think everyone will need to take a hit with the furlough program. And so we should look at whether that's shortening the employee's work week or other methods. But I think that we should really look to minimize any kind of layoffs in the city. Another aspect, I think that we need to focus on divisions that are being housed in properties that aren't owned by the city, that they're currently paying rent. And we should look to move them to a work from home situation so that the city can get out of paying rent to these, to house these divisions. And that savings can go towards the shortfall that we're going to be seeing.
Okay. So now we're going to move to just a couple of off-the-cuff kind of questions, just for you personally. And but before I do that, James, I just wanted to take a step back on the COVID-19 question. You mentioned rent freeze. There are actually two rent freeze ordinances that have been presented. One has to do with the rent freezes on 5 units or more, anything with rent control units, and the other one was rent freeze on including those properties, but 4 units or less that are non-owner occupied properties. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did I say that right, James?
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts about that, and which one you were, what your thoughts were about either one of those proposals?
So I think while there are good landlords out there, we should pass a ordinance that covers the majority. So that's whether it's 4 units or down or 4 units and up. We should look at protecting the majority of Jersey City residents who are tenants.
Okay. And so the question I had for you is specifically, you're very involved with the Leonard Gordon Park. Most recently, the mayor proposed and probably come before the city council this Wednesday, May 6th, at our council meeting. He's going to have a resolution to rescind the arts tax referendum, and then the stopping the continued collection of the open space trust fund. Do you have any thoughts about that and what it's going to impact Leonard Gordon Park as potentially, or other parks throughout the city?
So that's actually a very good question. It's something I was actually thinking about last week. With the Open Space Trust Fund, I believe it's a penny or two that that get collected from residents. And I think to say that that's going to solve any budget issues is it's only $1 million that actually would not get collected. I think it's worth keeping the open space trust fund because people like to see things being done in their city. They want to see parks getting fixed. They want to see maintenance being kept. We need to look at making cuts within City Hall and in terms of salaries and everything else. So I would actually be in favor of keeping the open space trust fund. And as it relates to the arts, it hasn't been voted on yet, and so I think that it should be rescinded. So that's my opinion on that, on those two topics.
And so, Patrick, I have a couple questions for you because you've been very efficient with your time, which is great.
I don't know
So,
if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
yeah, I know. It's a good thing, I think. So let me just ask the first question, and I say this with a degree of, I don't know what the right phrase would be, but deference maybe, but, I think a question that maybe some potential residents in the Heights might have, and in the future maybe voters in November is, I think you're a reasonably young guy in your 20s. And so if there's somebody that maybe says, hey, Patrick, you have the experience, do you have the sort of maturity to handle the position? How would you answer that question to someone who might take pause given your age?
Yeah, so I guess just for the record, I am 26 years old. I turned 26 on April 13th.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you, thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I would just say that you can look at my track record with Leonard Gordon Park. You can look at it with the Jersey City Reservoir Alliance, with the Parks Coalition. I've been part of real accomplishments, whether it's to renovate a once forgotten park into something with endless possibilities, or whether it's trying to restore the reservoir to be the oasis of Jersey City. I've been involved in a couple of these things that people, 2, 3 times my age, are just trying to find out exist. I would also say that, I like I stated before, I have a master's in public administration. I believe that, age necessarily isn't anything to do with experience. I think it's what you can show. And I think out of all the candidates that have put their name in, I have the most to show for it. Another thing when looking at the Heights is I think the Western Slope community, for the most part, has always felt underrepresented and felt like they haven't had a true voice when you're comparing the entire Heights. I've been there with them. I've attended their Nelson Avenue Association meetings. I helped with Judy Walton with St. Anne's. I helped in St. John's. I just think that age is frivolous, and I think that at the end of the day, what Jersey City needs is a councilman that's going to support the people, that's going to be an independent voice, and that's going to really try their best to represent them in a way that is appropriate.
Alrighty, thank you. And then let me ask one follow-up, which I just forgot to ask when you answered on the budget. We'll see where we end up on the budget, but one of the tough decisions that Rolando and I may face on the council, and that you would, if you were appointed to this seat, would be questions around essential services versus raising taxes. That we may have enough of a budget gap. You mentioned things like furloughs, things we can do, makes a lot of sense. But if we do end up in a situation where we're looking at the question of raising taxes versus essential services, how are you going to think about that question, and how are you going to approach it in the coming months?
I think that, it's a hard choice, and it really depends on the essential services, right? I think that because of COVID-19, it's important that we keep the streets clean and that we keep parks clean as well. Where we can see cuts are probably in recreation for now, because we're trying to practice social distancing and we're trying to keep people at home. That's where we can see the cuts. Again, essential services such as DPW are essential and they're needed. And I would hate to see them be cut and, it affect the Heights or it affect Greenville or any other area in Jersey City.
Can I follow up on that, James? Um, so just as an example, um, would you prioritize like rent control, say monitors or something like that, staff as essential work, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely think during this time, I would definitely prioritize that because you're always going to have, it's not all of them, but you're always going to have one or two large scale tenants that are going to try to get away with things that shouldn't be allowed. And so, yeah, I would consider those guys essential employees.
Alrighty, so we'll end it here by turning it over to you. So we'll give you a last chance to kind of make any final statement and a last sort of a closing for your candidacy.
Sure. So first off, I'd like to thank Councilperson Solomon and Rolando Lavarro for having this process. I think that going forward, a process like this is needed. And what I would say is, at the end of the day, what the Heights community needs is someone that has been with the community, has actually been involved in the community, and understands where the community wants to go, where it's been, and the issues that are surrounding not only the Heights, but Jersey City overall. And I believe that I am that voice, especially when you look at residents who are in college who now aren't able to get a job or aren't able to get the internship that they were promised in the summer. We need a new voice in the council, and we need a new generation who understands those difficulties that they're going to be facing. And so I hope to have your support, and whether it's now or in November, we'll be out there, and we'll do our best to connect with you guys, especially during this COVID-19. I would also like to say that while we've been handling this COVID-19 situation well, I have, for one, made sure that we continue to provide services to the community. And if anyone needs any help with essential products, I would say please reach out at patrickambrosi@gmail.com, or you can have my cell. It's 201-674-4094. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Patrick. We appreciate your time. Stay safe, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.